Why did Zelensky sack the guy right now? What precipitated that? Do you know?
A battle of resources. Sirski said, "I need these resources. Without brigades, I can't hold Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, and we're going to lose the urban defensive belt. I need brigades now. I need brigades now." And Fedorov went, "No, no, no. We need to continue investing these resources from the West into the drone operation." And it came down to it's a battle of resources.
I see. So it's not about Zelensky being afraid of this young rival who could challenge him for the presidency or something like that. That's all being read into this thing.
Well, I mean, I'm sure it's Ukraine, and you've got these, political machinations in there. But the thing that precipitated was the struggle between Sirski and Fedorov over resources.
Right.
Yeah,
Ray, you're
and
chomping at. Go ahead, Ray.
yeah, I would just add that Fyodorov is not as corrupt as the others, but he's only 35. I mean, give him a little time. That's the only reason he's not as corrupt as the others. I mean, um, there is a new element here, it seems to me, and that is that the Russians, including Putin, are lumping the U.S. together with the Europeans as being the real fly in the ointment here. Uh, it's getting pretty tough, the rhetoric. And I do think that Putin is under increasing pressure uh, to have some sort of forceful response. Now, I think that's been exaggerated in the past, but I think, I'm very impressionable. And just 2 hours ago, I was watching some video of the blowing up of the equivalent of the Amazon warehouse in Moscow. And man, look at those clouds, and where there's smoke, there's fire. And this was fired from Ukraine. And so what I'm thinking now is simply that Oreshnik is ready. I say that Putin is probably under increasing pressure to do something more demonstrative than he's been doing. I think there's an equal chance that he'll send an Oreshnik now to the decision-making centers in Kiev. He's already demonstrated the Oreshnik outside of Kiev, and he said that he sent monitors in there, little drones, to measure how much damage was done here and there, so he can destroy these things and not create a lot of collateral damage, and of course, no radiation. So I think that he's under increasing pressure. I think it's just like a 50-50 thing. He has said when this has been raised, and he said with some pique, he said, "Look, drones. What are you telling me? There was a drone in Romania. Now they're saying it's a Russian drone. Why are they saying that? Oh, Ursula von der Leyen said that. Oh, right, that good source there. But he's agitated about these drones. Okay." And what he said is, look, these drones, yeah, they're happening, but they're pinpricks in equivalent. What he says is they have no effect on the battle in the battlefield against Ukraine. They're not going to have any effect on the war. Quote, "This is the main point," end quote. In addition to that, you have the development, and Scott will know more about this than I, of the equivalent of a Starlink system, which increases the precision of the Russian missiles and drones. And you also have other technical things that are increasing the Russian ability to move against these things. So what I'm saying here is that I think Putin will be able to weather this thing out, but there is increasing pressure on him. I don't know how many Russians see what I saw on this Western thing a couple of hours ago about their Amazon mammoth warehouse being blown up, but I think that does have some effect on how Putin will react. And all I'm saying is now today, I do not rule out one Oreshnik strategically placed to hit a decision-making center in Kiev, and that's where I think the main response will come The Russians have free reign in Kiev. My God, there are no Patriots. There are no other kind of missiles to restrain the Russians. So that's where the impact will come. Will the Russians do something more dramatic? Yeah, I think they may, but won't have, quoting Putin, it won't have any impact on the conduct of the war. That is the main thing, end quote.
Scott, follow up.
Look, as Ray knows, I'm somebody who, you know, cut my teeth on the argument that Russia needed to expand this conflict into Europe. I was a I mean I'm the guy that gave the shoot the dog speech at St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, telling a panel of Russian diplomats that Europe is a rabid beast and Russia needs to assume the role of Atticus Finch in shooting the dog. Um, and yet I've changed my position because I listened to Vladimir Putin speak at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, at the plenary session, which is one of the major foreign policy speeches of the year. Everybody waits for this moment to see what the president will say. And when I first heard his words, I was very disappointed because he didn't mention the Ukrainian conflict once. And this speech was given on June 5th. On June 3rd, the opening day of the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, over 90 some odd drones were fired through the Baltic states, by the way, into St. Petersburg. The Russians know where these drones came from. These drones did strike targets in Kronstadt and all this. This comes again 3 weeks after, or less than 3 weeks after the Starobelsk slaughter of 21 innocent children. It was an act of murder. There was no doubting that this was a college. This was specifically picked out by the Ukrainians to commit murder, an act of intimidation, the beginning of this drone campaign. And I was under the impression that Vladimir Putin had to do something, had to do something. He had no choice but to do something. And instead, he gave a speech that said he will do nothing, nothing to escalate this war, because he will not allow this war to define Russia's future. Instead, he focused on economic stability. He focused on creating a sound investment environment. And he was successful because 130 nations participated in the St. Petersburg International Forum. And 20,000 people showed up, the largest, doubled the size from last year. And $84 billion of foreign investment were injected into the Russian economy. $84 billion. Because Putin said, I believe in stability. Stability is what's going to push us forward. Now, in this question and answer period, of course, he answered questions about the war and he gave his Stalin-esque response to the generals, ordering them to go to the front, just like the Great Patriotic War. Then he finished with Robotajem, brat, keep working, brothers, which just sent the shivers up my spine, because at that moment I knew that he would never abandon the Russian soldier either. Vladimir Putin knows what the hell he's doing. Nobody else knows anything. The Russians are not in panic. The wild berries factory going up, it's something. But the lesson I took away from Vladimir Putin's presentation is, if you're going to talk about escalation, the first question that has to be answered is, then what? Because right now, Putin's response is, we're doing nothing and we're winning. We're not going to escalate because we're winning. We're winning on every single front. There is no pressure on Vladimir Putin right now. There's pressure on Russian. Look, the Russians have TV talk shows just like we do. People need to understand in Russia that these talk shows make money off of viewership. The Russians aren't immune to this. So how do you get viewers? Controversy. And so there's a lot of controversy going on right now, and it's it's fanning fanning the flames, so to speak, of passions to get clicks here, clicks there. Vladimir Putin doesn't give a damn about any of this. There is no pressure on Vladimir Putin to do anything because Russia is when I keep hearing stories about how Gerasimov in the Russian general staff is pressuring him. For what? They're winning. They're winning. They're not losing. They're winning. You can't tell the president to do something different when he's winning. $84 billion invested because he has decided not to escalate. Because when you escalate, you change the investment in the atmosphere. People will not invest in a country that's getting ready to go to war with Europe. There's no reason to go to war with Europe. There's no reason to escalate. They will continue to do it. Oreshnik, the three missiles that were fired were experimental missiles. He hasn't fired an operational Oreshnik yet. He sort of chortled at it the last time. He has fired last night 30 Iskander M's into Kiev, killing everything it hits. The Ukrainians, the decision making sense, they're hunting down the drone commander, Magyar. They almost got him the other day in Kherson. He's going to die soon. All of the Ukrainians are going to die. They're all being hunted down. They don't stand a snowball's chance in hell. This is the reality. Now, we have people in the West that are promoting a different atmosphere because they talk to taxi drivers and they talk to movers and they talk to old people on the hill. But the reality in Russia is Vladimir Putin's under no internal pressure whatsoever. And you're seeing ridiculous games being played right now by the remnants of the old elite establishment. I call them liberal elites, but the oligarchs. For instance, and I'm wrestling with how I still have to get some answers. But this whole, the oligarch that wrote the open letter to the Economist, saying, "Oh, please, West, don't hurt us. You don't want to bring down Russia." Um, there's a game being played here. It's mental warfare. It's an information warfare operation that's being played right now to create the impression that there is pressure on Putin, that Putin is being pressured to do something, etc. My assessment is that there is no viable pressure. There is no real pressure on Putin. Putin, no one can identify what the pressure point is. If you're going to tell me that there's pressure being put on Putin, what is it? Because he just proved that he has a viable investment environment because of his policies, $84 billion injected at a time of international sanctions. Gerasimov is winning the war. So what's Gerasimov going to ask for? Because everything you want Putin to do, all these people who say escalate, will only cause Russia's position to get worse. Russia's winning right now. The last thing you want to do is do something that solidifies Ukrainian resolve, that injects meaningful Western military and economic intervention. The West is in disarray. Ankara proved that. Ankara was a joke, an absolute joke. What's the big story that came out of Ankara? Licensed production of the Patriot. Do you understand how empty that is? There will never be a single Patriot missile assembled in Ukraine, ever. In the history of Ukraine, it will never happen. And yet that's the headline. That's the hope. You want Putin to do what? Change something that changes the fact that the West is collapsing as we speak? So no, there's just no pressure on Putin right now. This is a Western fabrication. And it's getting echoed and echoed and echoed and echoed in hopes that it can be projected into Russia so that people in Russia start to ask questions. But again, I'll leave it with this. St. Petersburg and Moscow are two regions that have been relatively untouched when it comes to this war. Yes, you get black smoke, and yes, you get a thing. But, they've avoided the massive mobilization efforts, because they just don't want, dead bodies coming back to these places. At St. Petersburg, after the drone attacks, tens of thousands of St. Petersburg men are lining up to volunteer to go to the front. Anybody who thought that they were going to break the spirit of the Russians, that the Russians were going to, suddenly get cold feet and not want to do this war. Tens of thousands of St. Petersburg military-age men are going and signing contracts to go to the front to end this war, to bring it to an end. That's Russia. And that's the reality. And this is why Putin's not going to do anything to escalate this war, because he's winning this war on all fronts.
Uh, uh, Joe, may I respond? Yeah, Scott, I've always said precisely what you've just said. The question is how you define escalate. Now, in the past, as you suggested, many people have been saying that Putin is under pressure to escalate against the Europeans. In other words, to hit a member of NATO. I never thought that would be a sensible thing to do, and I never thought Putin would allow that. As a matter of fact, when the Latvians said that they were going to make 5 firing spots available to the Ukrainians to shoot drones into Russia, Putin himself said, that's not going to happen. That's never going to happen. And indeed, the Latvians never did allow the Ukrainians to do that. So it's not a matter of escalating into Europe. It's a matter of escalating in Ukraine. And I think we're already seeing that. The attacks over the last 6 nights, and all I'm saying is that Oreshnik is ready now. If and I do think there's a little pressure on Putin to show that he's up to this thing and that he can retaliate against the Ukrainians, not against the rest of the Europeans. I think it's possible that he'll use Oreshnik if this pressure that I think is real comes to the point where he wants to do something demonstrative. It's easily done. It's going to be limited in its collateral damage. It's kind of an exemplar of as clean a devastating weapon as you can get. So all I'm saying is that I see an even possibility that in response to this pressure, he'll respond within Ukraine, and I would expect that you say Oreshnik within the next couple of months before the Duma elections in September. But that's just speculation on my part. I think the pressure is real, but he'll respond by limiting it, by limiting the escalation to within Ukraine. And as I say, there's no air defense in Ukraine anymore. So, if you want to talk about a cakewalk for missiles and bombers and fighters and all that kind of stuff, that's what the Russians have now in Ukraine.
Let me just say this on the pressure that the West is trying to create is the pressure that says we need to bring this war to an end because it's just gone on for too long and it's too bloody and too costly and all that. But as you have rightly pointed out, Putin has escalated. But understand that the escalation he's done means that this war is going to drag out a lot longer. Putin has said Odessa is a Russian city. Putin has said Sumy is a Russian city. Putin has said Kharkov is a Russian city. So this war doesn't end when Russia liberates the totality of the Donbass, the totality of Zaporozhye, the totality of Kherson. This war ends when Russia creates the buffer zone required, which means Russia will absorb new cities into its new territories. This war ends, and Putin made this point, with denazification. Denazification. This is the total eradication of everything the West has built in Ukraine. There will be nothing left. It will all be gone. This war doesn't end tomorrow. There is no pressure on Putin in this war. Quickly. This war ends when all root causes of the conflict are resolved. And that means the total eradication of Banderist ideology and everybody who has embraced that. I think we talked about this last time. Putin, they are taking names, Ray. They're taking names. The names go on a little list, and the little list goes to people, and those people will go out and root these bastards down and kill them all. This is the mood in Russia today. That when I was there, 2 years ago, and I went to the special military operation, there was genuine goodwill towards the Ukrainian people, genuine goodwill. I mean, these were our cousins, these were our brothers, these were our this. You hear this now and again in Russia, but what you hear more often is kill them all. They're tired of these Ukrainians. They're tired of these people who tolerate, because he's not just now, he brought Andrei Melnik and reburied him. He's now bringing the founder of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, and he's going to rebury them. Zelensky is a Nazi, a living, breathing Nazi, and it's a Nazi regime. The commanders that he is conferring with right now are Nazis, every single one of them. They are hardcore, tattoo-wearing swastika sons of bitches. This is the reality of Ukraine. And the Russians are no longer, I mean, you can hear it in the Western liberal sympathetic circles. They're not all Nazis. They're not all bad. You go to mainstream Russia and they're kill them all. The concept that there's going to be good relations between the Russian people and their Ukrainian brothers, no. The West has created a Nazi state in Ukraine, a literal Nazi state, and Russia's just not going to tolerate it. One of the important things about Russian national identity, as it currently is manifested, is the history of Russia. You hear Putin speak about this all the time. We must protect our history. This is why he takes umbrage when morons like Donald Trump want to say that the United States won the war, that Russia played a minor part. You were there at Victory Day, Ray. You know how important that history resonates with the Russian people. And so people need to understand that the resurrection of a Nazi state in Ukraine cannot be tolerated by Russia at all and will not be tolerated by Russia. This is truly existential because this gets into the very essence of what Russia is, who the Russians are. They have to defend their history, and they will defend their history, and they are defending their history. And in the West, we don't understand it. We sit here and we mock them. Oh, they're living in their past glory. No, that's what defines who they are today. The great patriotic war, the sacrifice of 27 million, defines who they are today. It's an essential core element, a core value of the national ethos of the Russian people. And the notion that Ukraine is going to be allowed to remain intact when it has literally transformed itself into the modern day living manifestation of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists who allied themselves with the Nazis, who slaughtered Jews, who slaughtered Poles. It's not. Go to Russia. Ray, I know you have, but I'm just telling people, go to Russia. See for yourself. This crap we're seeing in the West about, the loss of will to fight, the Russian people are tired. They're tired. They're tired of Nazis. And it's real. And I think that this war is not going to end anytime soon. This war is going to precipitate not just a total termination of what we call the Ukrainian national state today, but the root cause of this conflict is also in Europe. And I think that Putin has also made a strategic decision that Europe needs to collapse as well. It won't be done by Russia's hand, but again, to escalate into Europe creates a reason for Merz to continue to exist.
Right.
But Russia wins when Merz goes away.
Right.
Russia wins when Marine Le Pen becomes president of France. Russia wins when the United Kingdom goes to whatever cesspool they're going to go into after Keir Starmer. And so Russia has a winning hand right now. The West created this Ukrainian engine that was supposed to be driving a machine that was going to bring Russia down. Russia's converted the Ukrainian engine into the machine that's going to bring Europe down. And I just see this war going on for a couple more years. I see the Russians, being very deliberate in their approach, and this ends with the total destruction of the Ukrainian state.
Scott, I want to ask you, when you say you hear people in Russia saying kill all Ukrainians, are they talking about the leadership or all Ukrainian people?
Well, mainly the leadership, but the point of the sensibility of we don't we the Russians viewing the Ukrainian people as innocent players. They don't view them as innocent players anymore. You have to understand the brainwashing that has taken place in Ukraine over the course of the past several decades. The Ukrainian children today are taught that the Russians are inferior, that the brotherhood, the sense of common national identity. We're all Slavic people. The Ukrainian people don't believe that. The especially in Western Ukraine, they believe that the Muscols, they are orcs, they are inferior, they are this, and it's playing out on the battlefield. See how Russians are treated by the Ukrainians, the Ukrainian soldiers, the average Ukrainian soldiers. Nobody talks about Kursk and what happened when the Ukrainian forces went into Kursk. The villages on the border area where they couldn't get the elderly people out and the young people out. You know, hundreds of Russian civilians were slaughtered by the Ukrainians, who went in there and butchered them and raped them. They filmed it. The Russians have this all on video because these criminals that went in there, they filmed it on their cell phones, and they went in and they got killed. And the Russians have the cell phones, and they've cataloged everything. Um, the murder of these 21 students at Starobelsk, straight up murder. They had thermal cameras on these drones, knowing they hit a dormitory, knowing the girls were going downstairs. They could see them with their thermal images as they dove their drones in to murder them. The Russians understand this. They see this all. They have all the evidence they need right now. So the idea that the Russians are saying, oh, there's the bad Ukrainian leadership, but then there's the good Ukrainian people. I think that the mood is shifting, that there is no good Ukrainian people anymore.
Yeah, but first of all, there are some Ukrainians who oppose the war. They don't want to be drafted. We see those films of them being press gang. But if you talk about killing all Ukrainian people, that's genocidal talk. And I don't care how
No,
much
again,
believe in the
Joe,
regime.
no, I'm not talking about killing all the Ukrainian people. I'm
No, not
talking
you.
about
No,
the
about you said
Russians
you
are talking
heard
about killing.
Russians say that. Russians saying
No,
that.
they're not saying kill all the Ukrainian people. They're saying
Okay.
that it's time to bring that the day of the gloves off, of the gloves on. Oh, you're soft and tender, and we no the Russians are starting to view Ukraine as an enemy state. That's the
Right.
difference. Not a brother state gone bad, not misguided people. It's not genocidal talk. This is just me being tired. It's very late here, and my brain isn't working. And no,
All
there's
right.
no genocidal talk. There's no genocidal talk. It's just that the mood that existed 2 years ago, where they viewed the Ukrainians as innocents trapped by bad leaders. I don't think they view the Ukrainians as innocents anymore. Yes,
Right.
you're right. There are people, but the people that are fighting. Let's get this straight here. The people that are fighting the forceful conscription, they're not fighting because they're against the war with. They're just against the war, but they're not sitting there going, "Oh, but the Russians are good people, and that's why we don't want to go." They don't want to go to war because they're going to die. Um, but there's a very big anti-Russian sentiment in Ukraine today, and and that's the reality. And the Russians sense it. So the idea that Ukraine is going to get this preferential treatment, this nice Slavic treatment, I think that's moving away. I think Ukraine is being viewed as an enemy state, and that's the difference. Not genocidal talk. I apologize for injecting those
Okay.
words into it.
That anti-Russian talk goes way back, and certainly in 2014, I was looking at an article by Bob Perry when she was writing about how the Russians are being called insects by
Yep.
Ukrainians. And then the idea that there may have been genocide in Donbass, is considered to be absolute Russian propaganda. But then when you think about them calling them insects, you have to wonder about whether, in fact, one of the International Court of Justice has allowed that case to go forward about whether Russia's claim that Ukraine may be committed genocide in Donbass back in 2014 to 2022.
Yeah.
Ray, you've been sitting there. Let's hear what you have to say about all this, please.
I'm sorry, Joe. What did you say?
Great, you've been sitting there listening, so I'd like to hear what you have to say.
No, I really don't have anything to add here. I think we're all on the same page. It's it's kind of the main thing that I would inject here is the Russian view of the potential U.S. role in making sure that their core interests are respected in any final outcome of this. For the nonce, the Russians come around to the view that forget about it. We can't depend on anything from Trump. But at the same time, I think their strategy, and Russians do have strategies, is that they're going to need the United States at the final outcome to make sure that the folks in what's left of NATO don't resist the notion of keeping Ukraine completely out of NATO and keeping it neutral. And for that, they'll need, at least they've indicated they think they need, the cooperation of someone like Trump, who is less mercurial but can see the need to have a situation calm down there in Europe. And with the disappearance of Merz and Macron and whoever they have there in England right now, this should be easier. The thing that I would point out that we have not discussed is that Merz is asking the German people to go back on the benefits of their social democracy. If you're a German now, Merz wants you not to be able to retire until you're 70. I mean, you guys don't know what 70 is. I do. Okay,
What are you
70.
talking about?
It's a
I'm going to
long
be 70 next month, but go on.
It's a long time, all right. And there are other social benefits that the I know the Germans, they take this as a matter of what's due them, and it is due them in any humane society. And so when Merz wants to raise 100 billion euros to fight in Ukraine or to give you or build up against a non-existent threat, well, maybe this time around, the Germans will be smart enough to say, well, wait a second, tell us more about this Russian threat. Tell us more. And maybe they'll say that, look, this is all for the benefit of the people that Merz used to work for, okay? The military intelligence complex, and we're not going to buy it. We want to be able to retire as usual at a much earlier age. And so I think there's going to be a lot of resistance in Europe to all these kinds of guys. And I think Putin is playing the waiting game, doesn't need to hurry, and is suffering the kinds of casualties in Ukraine that are tolerable for now and is unlikely to escalate except for the dominance that the Russians have in the air with their missiles and with their drones.
Well,
Let
Ray,
me
you
just
have to
throw-
retire even though you're beyond 70. You're not retiring anytime soon. Yes, Scott.
I just wanted to say, just speaking of insanity, did you see the former German defense minister talking about that not just Crimea will be returned to Ukraine, but that Kaliningrad would be returned to the Germans? I mean, this is now part of the. It just these people are going insane, and now we have the Lithuanians who are now jumping on board, saying yes, Kaliningrad must be taken back. That we cannot allow this Russian enclave to survive. It's time to. I mean, this is the kind of insanity that's coming out of Europe today. This is if people don't understand. I'm I'm going to Kaliningrad in September.
Whoa.
I've been invited to go there and do a very thorough report on Kaliningrad because it's becoming the one of it's going to become a center of friction between Russia and this European mass in decline. But as Ray knows, and Joe, you know this too. I mean, things that seem to be insane now, when the system is devolving, become possible. And we've got to be aware of the fact that there are some sick forces in Germany who think that they should get Kaliningrad back, and the Balts. We're living in some very dangerous times because Kaliningrad is Russia, and it's populated by Russians. It's a Russian enclave, a Russian city, and Russia's not going to give it up. And and these are the kind of things that Russia would use nuclear weapons to defend. Um, so it's just frightening times. That's all.
A very useful statement from that general, however, because now we really know what the intentions are amongst some, at least some part of the German leadership. They're being revanchist. They want to go back. They want to overthrow Putin. This is an aggressive, offensive action by Germany. I think it's good that we hear them say that. Yes, Ray. So, Ray, I want to ask you too, Scott, about something. I know Cy Hirsch seems to be going more and more off the deep end recently in terms of what he's writing about Russia. We all know him personally, and we understand the great work he's done. Now, he wrote his last piece. He's of course explaining that the drones are destroying Russia and Russia's going to lose the war and all of that. And he's quoting all of his U.S. intelligence sources. But he has something curious in here that I want to ask you about because I didn't know anything about this. I don't know if you guys have. That he said that he has learned in interviews in Washington that Ukraine's growing military success, I'm reading from him directly, has renewed regretful talk in Washington about a Ukrainian concession in late 2025 that had Putin accepted it would have put an end to the war. Peace seemed to be at hand when it was not. Zelensky's concession would have given Russia control of some of the land Putin's troops have won in the years of fighting in two battleground provinces in eastern Ukraine. The immediate reaction in Washington to Putin's rebuff of Zelensky's offer to trade land for peace was anger and a sense that the negotiating team had misread Putin's interest in a settlement. The thought now about what seemed to be Putin's duplicity is more nuanced and even sympathetic, that the Russian leader may have understood the lesson Nikita Khrushchev learned after he chose to withdraw his ships during the Cuban Missile Crisis. That failure and an economic crisis that followed put Khrushchev out of office within 2 years and a quiet retirement to a dacha outside of Moscow. Scott, do you know anything about this 2025 concession that Ukraine made that Russia rejected?
Well, I mean, I don't have access to these sources, so I don't. What I will say is this: that from the Russian perspective, which is understand that there's a cause and effect relationship between information that comes out of Washington D.C. And reality, meaning that Washington D.C. has spent. Vladimir Putin has come out and acknowledged that in August of 2025, in Alaska, Russia made some very um, sensitive concessions to the United States in order to bring an end to this conflict. And the Russian concessions were that they insisted they get the totality of the Donbass, that Ukraine would have to leave the Donbass. There was no negotiations, but that Russia would be willing to freeze the line of contact where it stands in Zaporozhye and Kherson. In effect, that Russia would be willing to consider cessation of hostilities with Ukraine holding on to parts of Kherson in Zaporozhye. So, from what I understand, Seymour Hersh's sources are trying to flip the script on this, saying that that Zelensky was making concessions or something of that nature, and that Russia rejected the concessions. That's not the way it the right. But Rubio and company won't talk about this. Uh, Rubio has said there were no concessions made, that there was no agreements made. Um, from the Russian perspective, there was that the Russians came in and they accepted. And this is a shocker to me because at the time I was someone who said that constitutionally this is impossible for Putin to do. Um, but Putin had made these concessions in August in an effort to bring an end to this conflict. What we have now is that there's a growing recognition that Russia actually was bending over backwards to bring this war to an end, and that it was Zelensky's refusal to accept these concessions. Um, and so I think what you're seeing is spin, where people are coming out trying to shift the blame away from Zelensky onto Putin, and that appears to be the gist of the narrative that are being promoted by the sources that Seymour is relying upon for this story. But I'm currently in France right now at a function that Seymour Hersh is here, and so Cy and I are good friends, and we will maybe we'll have the time to sit down tomorrow and hash this out. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, what I would say is that Cy has been talking to trusted sources for a very long time now. Some of them are probably as old as I am. I don't know what kind of yarns they're spinning, but I think a lot of it just doesn't parse, doesn't make any sense. And in a word, you can tell Cy, as I have told him personally, that he's talking to the wrong people. He's being misled now. On the business about whether or not there was an agreement at in Alaska on the 15th of August last year, this is a really important point. And it shows to me that it's a very volatile issue within the Russian leadership. Here we have Rubio saying what Scott said he said. There was no agreement. There was no agreement. Okay. But then you have Lavrov 2 days later, the foreign minister, saying, wait a second. The Russians came with this, the Americans came with this proposal, which had been given to us by Witkoff. And we went through every one of those little things, and we made some concessions in response, and that certainly is an understanding, is it not? Of course, there was that understanding. 3 days later, Putin. The Americans are right. There was no understanding here in Alaska. I can't figure that out. I think Putin's in charge, but it's very, very difficult to figure out why Lavrov can say that kind of thing. Then Putin can countermand him, as Putin has done on and other key issues, and not have some sort of friction at the top that I have not seen before in this particular regime in Russia. So, whether or not there was an agreement in Alaska, in my view, of course there was. Lavrov is right. Why is Putin saying, well, no, the Americans are right? Well, Putin does sort of defer, let's keep talking to these guys. One last point. I was reviewing, actually, I was filing some old statements from Putin. And more than a year ago, he was talking to submariners way up in the north part of Russia. And it was sort of an informal thing. And among the other things he says is, we're working now. The U.S. is really helping us with Ukraine. We're working on sort of some kind of a understanding. And, quote, I hope I'm not being too trustful of the United States. end quote. But I think we can have their help here. Well, holy Moses! I mean, but those in the Soviet leadership, Russian leadership, have been saying, "Look, you're far more trusting than you should be. Think about Minsk. Think about Istanbul. Think about all the times they took you to the cleaners, Putin." For him to say with these submariners off the, yeah, I hope I'm not being too trusting of the Americans. All I'm saying here is this is a live issue among the Soviet leadership, and Putin on the one hand seems relaxed enough to say, "Well, I hope I'm not being naive or too trusting." And yet, a lot of people are saying, "Well, yeah, that's what you are, Vladimir Vladimirovich. Stop it." In other words, it's a rankle that came out of my filing process. And I thought it was really, really interesting in retrospect of the last several months of what's happened with respect to Ukraine, the US, and Russia.
Now, maybe the most important word we discussed tonight was humiliation in the context of nuclear war and not humiliating your opponent, as Ray pointed out from Kennedy's speech in the context of the Middle East. But this applies also, I think, to the Ukraine war, because I remember the day of Russia's intervention in the Civil War, February 2022, I had this sinking feeling this was going to go on for a long time and that the West was not going to back down and Russia was not going to back down, that both sides were not going to allow themselves to lose this war or to be humiliated. Now, Scott, you're saying, and we've seen that that's what's happened. And there was a period where Macron and Scholz met with Zelensky in Paris and told him to give up and that he'd have to make peace with Russia. You're losing the war. That Germany and France had fought so many wars, and now they're friends. I don't know if you guys recall that Wall Street Journal reported that 2 years ago. So that the French and the Germans concluded that Ukraine had lost the war and they better give up. And now with these drones, they think they're going to win again. Well, whether they are or not is another question. So I'm asking you, Scott. You think that only the victory by Le Pen and maybe AfD in Germany is the German and French voters particularly can end this war alone by putting that kind of government in power, or otherwise, how long can this war go on, and how much will they avoid humiliation on both sides? Because now the German generals are talking and the British talking about war against direct war with Russia by 2030. They are planning to continue this. Who could stop it?
I the only thing that will stop it, I come back to what I said. The European dog needs to be shot. Europe is a fundamentally sick society. It's a non-existent. There is no Europe. I'm in France right now, surrounded by French people who are asked, like, "What is Europe?" Um, and then they're increasingly have to ask the question, "What is France?" Because in order to be Europe, you have to forget being French. They talk about Bastille Day and the humiliation that took place to the French nation because you required a QR code to attend Bastille Day, and in the past, the French people would come to watch the Bastille Day celebrations, but instead now the French government is saying that they can pick who they want to go. This is what's happening with all of Europe, where this vision of what Europe is that's being dictated by these unelected technocrats is you know it, this war will go on so long as Europe believes that in the Ukraine mission. This is all about the Ukraine mission. The Ukraine mission has become literally the only thing that makes the continuation of this European experiment viable. If you eliminate Ukraine, Europe will collapse on its own incompetence, its own inability to sustain a non-existent vision of what Europe is. Um, Marine Le Pen, I mean, on the one hand, she says that she wouldn't continue this war. On the other hand, she speaks of continuing the European Union and buying into this notion. So that could be some false hope there. I mean, I think Europe is broken. I think Europe is fundamentally broken. What used to be a collection of sovereign states has become this morass of ill-defined incompetence. I mean, Germany, it's 70 years old. When I lived in Germany when they had the best retirement program in the world. The German workers were the best workers in the world. I mean, German vacations were the best vacations in the world. And now, if you take a look at what's happening in Germany today, they're talking about you're gonna have to keep working till you're 70. Um, I mean, this is the collapse of society, and this is what's happening throughout Europe as we speak. So I think that there's going to be no shortcut to this victory. Humiliation only happens. You're humiliated only if you're alive. And again, I'm not talking about genocidal death, but I am saying that the humiliation of Europe ceases when Europe ceases to exist as this dysfunctional union that they've crafted together, and Europe reemerges as a collection of sovereign states. Um, and France becomes France, and Germany becomes Germany, and Italy becomes Italy, and so on and so forth. That I think is the direction that we're heading. There's too many issues that they try to make commonality with. Immigration is a huge problem right now in Europe, a huge problem. Um, and there is no unified solution. There's no solution that's agreed upon by the European collective, and so that alone is going to create fractures. The economy, the difference between the Parisian approach to economic union and the Berlin approach are irreconcilable. Europe is dysfunctional, and the only thing that keeps Europe talking in any cohesive fashion is this Ukrainian engine. And I think once Russia resolves the Ukrainian engine, turns it off, turn, shuts down the ignition, it's not about the humiliation of Europe. It means that Europe will no longer exist, and it'll have to reconstitute itself in something. And this is where the United States comes in. Um, you know, it's something I'm still struggling with because I can't fully explain it. It's not rational. As Ray said, President Putin continues to hold out some sort of deference to the United States. You have Kirill Dmitriev continuing to articulate tunnel diplomacy. I mean, this he continues to talk about how we're going to make everything great by building a tunnel. Nobody believes in this tunnel thing, but it's a vector that allows for the potential of Russian American cooperation. And I think the Russians are unwilling to shut the door on America because they are going to need American help to deal with the problem of European dysfunction.
Let me add a word about Germany. Um, I too lived in Germany during those times, Scott, for 5 years. Uh, the notion that Volkswagen is laying off 100,000 workers and that the rest of them will be working on building tanks, for God's sake, and not to mention the curtailment of social benefits. Well, it's not too long ago, and I was alive during World War II, where the Germans were faced with these kinds of decisions, namely, do they expand, seek Lebensraum, attack Russia? And they reacted with what the Germans now call schaffmäßige Ergebenheit, okay? Sheepish submissiveness. It's harder to say in English, okay? So, will they do that this time? Well, the Russians have a saying. It goes back to the 18th, 17th century. It's called Pachnet revoluție, okay? It's what, just short of 200 years that we had 1848. If memory serves, there was a lot of awful lot of revolution going on in Europe in 1848. I think we may be just years away from the same kind of revolution. Hopefully, not so gory and not so violent. But these guys who've been ruling Europe are going to be a fixture of the past. What will come in? The AfD? Well, there's good and bad about the AfD, but they'll be changed for sure. So maybe the Russians, in their more optimistic moments, say "Pachnit revoluție" in Western Europe, in Europe in general. It smells like revolution. For God's sake, let's not screw it up. Let's let them self implode, self immolate, if you will. And if we play a waiting game and keep Ukraine out of NATO, well, that's something we can build on that in future years. I think that's probably the way the more sanguine and sensible Russian leaders look at the situation.
Okay, let me end with this. Scott, you wrote a piece this week in which you refuted the arguments that Russia's losing the war, that the drone war has changed the entire game. And you said, for example, one example you gave was that people are saying now that Russia had to stop the export of diesel because of a shortage of diesel within Russia caused by these Russian, European made drones. We should make it clear that Europe is running this war as using the territory of Ukraine to fight Russia, their drones being fired from Ukraine. So you refuted those arguments, and because you said that had happened a year or two before, and they recovered from that. They'd also cut off diesel. Now that article was a response to a piece by Gilbert Doctorow, an analyst based in Brussels, who said that he's pushing pretty much the same line Cy Hirsch is, that the Russia's losing the war because of these drones. He thinks Russia should hit Europe, which you have changed your position on, that to just take out the German facilities making these drones that are hitting Russia. He doesn't go into any discussion about what that means about Article 5, about direct war between Iran and Russia. Doesn't mention that at all, which of course is the main issue about whether Russia should hit Germany or not. But I wanted to ask you, I did ask Gilbert to come on the show to debate you. I did mention that last week. He refused, and he said he wouldn't debate someone who made personal attacks on him. So I wanted you to respond for one thing in particular last week, and I do need you to help me understand this. You said last week that he was an MI6 operative. I was wondering if you had any evidence to back that up, Scott.
Well, evidence that is usable in a court of law? No, of course not. I could not convict Gilbert Doctorow of being an MI6 operative. But I will say this, and I'd be more than happy to walk Gilbert through it. If it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, it's a frickin' duck. Gilbert Doctorow is literally playing the MI6 misinformation game. Every talking point he puts out there is literally a mirror image of what's coming out of London Station in terms of this war of perceptions. So did Gilbert Doctorow come at this independently? You know, perhaps, but again, we can, if we want to, and I have spent a lot of time doing this, going through his past, going through, his time in Russia, going through the circles that he operated in. You know, he operated in Russia in a time when, MI6 and the CIA and other Western services co-opted the Russian liberal elite circles that he operated in. I'm not saying that he was I'm saying that the Russians, that circle was heavily co-opted by Western intelligence to achieve the purpose of bringing Russia down. And that Gilbert Doctorow over the years has mirror image the argument that's put out by the West about Russia, what Russia is, etc. He claims that he was supportive of Putin, but that he changed his mind. But he can't, you know, the moment when he changed his mind is when MI6 changed their mind. So I would just say that I can make an extraordinarily strong circumstantial case that Gilbert Doctorow's message mirror images the message coming out of Vauxhall.
Okay.
But let me just say this. you know, the reason why Gilbert doesn't want to debate me, and because I read his counter, you can't sit here and tell me that Russia that Ukraine is winning the war, that Russia's losing the drone war, and cite as evidence two German drone programs. Because he did. He cited two specific German drone programs. He cited one from the secret factory in Munich, and the other one was the ones that are blowing up the. He said German made drones with AI. These are his words. These programs don't exist. So how can Gilbert Doctorow have any credibility when he's going to make an argument that Russia's losing a drone war to two non-existent German drone programs? And I pointed this out point by point by point by point, how ignorant he is about this. This is one of the problems too, is that the whole thing about drone wars is a fiction. They're creating this fiction about Ukrainian capabilities that don't exist. The drones that Gilbert Doctorow spoke of, the Ukrainian military themselves have rejected those drones because those drones don't work. Why doesn't Gilbert Doctorow know this? Why does he feel this superficiality of his approach to read a New York Times article, misquote it, misrepresented, and hype it up to be something that it isn't? This shows a lack of seriousness. This shows a lack of discipline, of due diligence, of intellectual capacity, to be honest. I mean, and then you have to say to yourself, somebody who has a PhD from Columbia and Harvard background, this is deliberate. So now I come back again. He is deliberately propagating propaganda. This is not well-reasoned thought from a Harvard-educated, Columbia-educated intellectual. No intellectual would propagate the crap that he just propagated. This is a man who went through a Columbia PhD program. He's supposed to understand historiography. He's supposed to understand research. He supposedly has navigated his way through it. Hell, I read his thesis. He navigates his way through archives. He knows how to do research and accumulate data. And he failed on the most basic points, and he published it. So again, he's not an intellectual. He's putting out propaganda that mirrors the MI6, messaging. So either he's one of the most inherently incompetent people in the world, or he's an MI6 operative. It's one or the other, Joe.
Yeah, I have no problem, and I invite you to challenge him on the fact. That's great. But we have to draw the lines when you make any kind of personal attack against him and call him an agent without having any fact. You're saying he's mirroring that what MI6 saying. That sounds fine to me. I just want to make it clear that we have some rules here about attacking.
But Joe, Joe, let me put it this way, and Ray can jump in. Yeah, I've been in the intelligence business for an awful long time. Okay, agent is a strange word because it's often misused. What I will say is I don't believe he's an MI6 officer, so I don't think he's in the employ of MI6. Now,
Right.
Agents, you can be a knowing agent, you can be an unwitting agent, and the intelligence services are very good at going out and bringing in people and using them to echo chambers, especially in the information warfare spectrum. So when I imply that Gilbert Doctorow is mirroring this, if he's doing it unwittingly, meaning that he is not knowingly cooperating or collaborating with MI6, that does not preclude the possibility that Gilbert Doctorow is, in fact, operating as an agent of the MI6 information operation because he is part of the echo chamber, whether he's a paid asset like half of the British media establishment, or he's just somebody who is susceptible to inputs that he then echoes unwittingly. But I won't back away from the fact that his messaging mirrors that of being put out by MI6 today.
Okay. Well, thank you, Scott. Ray, you want to have a final word?
Let me interject here. I disagree with Scott on this. I think we need to make 100 flowers bloom, like Mao Zedong said. I think we have an honest difference of opinion on this, I don't find any evidence that Gil Doctorow is working with intentionally or unintentionally. Some of his views apparently coincide with what the British are putting out, but I would just say that we need to be respectful about other people's opinions, and I'd also say that Gil worked as a corporate manager in Russia for, I think, 2 or 3 decades after he got out of Columbia. So his experience is not just academic, it's from a very, very intimate familiarity with Russia at that time and Russia now. And the only other thing I'll say is that I never heard of Gil Doctorow until the preeminent Soviet specialist Stephen Cohen took me by the shoulder and said, "Ray, this is about 12 years ago. You're going to Russia, huh? Oh, you're going to a conference that Gil Doctorow is going to be there. I want you to meet him. I'll write him an email because he's the best around. He knows Russia. He knows it in and out. He's got experience you can't match. And I want you to meet him and see what he's got to offer for you. And I think it'll be really good for you to be in touch." Well, I did go to that meeting. I did meet Gil. I was impressed by him. He's a very knowledgeable guy, and he's taken some of his lines of reasoning far too far for me. But that doesn't mean that I can't say, well, well, let me think about that, and maybe Putin is under more pressure. And as I said before, I think he is. So you don't have to agree with everything somebody says, but the notion uh, that he's just saying something that some intelligence operatives are also saying, I don't agree with that, and so I'll respectfully disagree, and hopefully not get into any arguments with my friend Scott over this. But yeah, I not only disagree, I strongly disagree.
But Ray, you're an intelligence professional. Okay,
Right,
I know you are, and I respect you, and I respect the tradecraft of the CIA. This is a Columbia-educated historian
right.
who didn't do his due diligence. What does this tell you? I mean, you just told me this is a man of great intellect who knows Russia better than anybody else does. He published something where his every fact was wrong. How do you deal with that?
Well, Scott, he was wrong on these specifics that you mentioned, and you pointed that out, and that was really good. And maybe he learned from that. But I have to confess, I've been wrong, and so have you. Even Joe Laurie
No,
has
no, no,
been
no,
wrong
no.
in
I
the
have
past.
never been that wrong, Ray. I actually do my due diligence. And when I have never made crap up. Okay, he committed to an article that says Russia has lost the war! Exclamation mark. And the major points to prove it were the drone activity, and he manufactured two things that don't exist. Ray, this is not how a Columbia educated PhD person operates. You know this. I know that. And we can't sweep this under the rug.
Well, he got it from the New York Times. He got it from some respected. He didn't make it up, for God's sake. So
No, he
he
did
was
because he
wrong.
didn't.
He was wrong on those particulars, but hey, give him a little slack.
I
Give
no,
him
no,
the
no, no, no,
benefit of the.
because Ray, people are dying. Ray, people are dying. I don't give anybody slack.
But
He
this
is
doesn't have
promoting.
any.
He's
Yeah, this doesn't have
promoting
any
a line
indication.
of thinking. He's promoting a line of thinking that could be extraordinarily dangerous. Extraordinarily dangerous. And he needs to be careful. He needs to be very careful with what he's doing. That's my
Okay,
take.
gentlemen, thank you very much for more than 2.5 hours of wide-ranging
Well,
discussion. And
thank you, Joe.
I think it was enlightening on many points. So I want to say goodbye and thank our audience for joining us.